Okay, we are back live with another Between the Pages book chat. And today our guest is horror fantasy author Jessa Forrest, and she's here to talk about her series, The Slaughter Chronicles. Sounds fun. And I'll turn it over to her now and let her introduce herself. So take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. This is so exciting for me. My name is Jessa, and I write poetry and grimdark adventures that lean more towards contemporary than epic fantasy, and have been described as by turns lighthearted and visceral. I like to create my own sort of Lovecraftian eldritch gods and set them in modern times. My series is The Slaughter Chronicles, and it's a grimdark contemporary fantasy, a series of novellas and short fiction about a world where humans don't believe in monsters, but they are very much real, and they will eat you. And it follows the story of a werewolf and future void hunter, Regina Slaughter. And my first book, and I'm not going to get this right, I apologize, is Pulling Teeth and Other Stories. And it actually, the ebook is on sale for free today until May 24th in honor of this wonderful interview. And the paperback copy went live yesterday. So you can find everything on both of those versions of that book on Amazon.
Yeah, so I already have my copy, so
oh, thank you so much.
So but everyone else, feel free to go get their copy. The link is in the description, so if you're watching this, you can easily find it. Anyway, so give us an overview of the first book and the series in general.
Okay, so the series in general, my main protagonist is Regina Slaughter, and in this book, it spans 2 novellas and 3 short stories that center around her childhood and her upbringing. So in the grand context of like the entire scheme, it's more of like a prequel or a book 0, if you will, but right now it is like the first publication of the series. And her like I said, it's 2 novellas and 3 short stories that follow her path to becoming what I call a void hunter, which is basically a monster hunter. So in this universe that I've created, there are supernatural creatures like vampires, werewolves, and like witches or mages, but there are also these other more horrific nightmare creatures. And the void is another dimension where all of these creatures come from. What inspired me to think about the supernatural in general was like, where do these things come from? So that I put my own little spin on that. So you could also call it a portal fantasy or crossworlds fantasy. So the first novella in Pulling Teeth starts off in a pretty precarious situation for Regina. She's trapped in a cage and suffers through these bizarre scientific experiments that have something to do with her genetics and like the type of werewolf strain that she has, like the contamination that she received from an accident. And she's 9 years old, and it gets dark really quickly. These are not like my protagonist is like, the stories range, she's between 9 and 13 years old, but it is not a middle grade book at all. Things do get pretty dark.
Yeah, well, there are horror elements, obviously. So, yeah, one would hope they get dark. So, and yeah, and Christy says hi. So, hi, Christy. Anyway, so you mentioned sort of eldritch gods elements to the book. So why did you go that route? Are you a Lovecraft fan, or you like me, you like to play in the world?
I am a huge Lovecraft fan, but I also love to play in the world. And the idea for the story actually started with a role-playing game campaign that I did with my husband back in 2015. We were dating at the time, but it's called World of Darkness. And it centers around sort of the more sort of mysterious and technical aspects. It's like a very hard magic system. And my inspiration came from, well, how can I make this easier to play? And making it easier, so well, if I had, just make up my own sort of thing with it. So for copyright reasons, there is no Cthulhu in my books, but there is definitely that air of unknowable, like the not necessarily madness, but just if if a human tries to think about it too hard, they'll lose their mind, because you can't, like, the creatures are very ponderous and just so unhuman, like just so far removed from the human experience. And one of the things that I try to do to ground that is to show by the other human characters that, well, maybe the monster isn't really the monster.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the main character in the series. What's she like?
Okay. So Regina is she's actually quite hopeful, considering that all of these dark things happen to her. As I said, the first novella is called Dead Girl Moon, and it starts off, she's in an experimental sort of laboratory facility run by an organization of monster hunters called Hades. And instead of being scared or just sort of more shut down by the situation, she's a very observant character, and she always tries to make the best out of a bad situation. And the bad situation that she encounters in the novel, or in the novella, is her best friend, who's in the next cell over, goes missing. She's taken away in the night when Regina is asleep, and Regina has to, well, not has to, she can't really do anything until she's let out of the cage for specific reasons. But she tries to figure out what happened to her friend, and not do more damage to herself or the other people who are captured in the process. She's very conscious of, and being a werewolf, she does find a pack. There are, like, the typical tropes, like the alpha trope, and she's very protective of the family that she finds later on in the stories.
Okay, so do you have any themes that run through the book?
I try to, if you have too many themes, things tend to get muddled. So I try not to do everything all at once, even though I want to. Like, I would love to have all of the themes. But I think the biggest one in Pulling Teeth is found family and those sort of morally gray areas where, yes, like, one character thinks another character is bad news, but to, Regina, he or she may or may not be. So a lot of, like, what perceptions do we have that influence how we see the world? I like to put that through my characters.
Okay, that sounds interesting. So what was the hardest scene for you to write in the book?
The hardest scene would be in the second novella in the book, called Moonshine, and that was actually a conversation between two of the characters. And it was difficult because when I first start drafting, and this is kind of like a writing craft answer, I either start with, like, an image in my head of a scene and there's, like, no sound and I have to fill in the dialogue, or a string of dialogue will just, randomly pop up in my head. And when those strings of dialogue happen, that's really great, because those are usually very, like, fluid and natural sounding. But every time I have to insert dialogue into, like, a scene that I can describe very well and flesh out what the characters are doing, like the blocking, but then when I have to put the dialogue in, it always sounds so wooden and forced until, like, the very, very final stages when the book is actually ready to publish. So that was, like, the most difficult, is when I have trouble with dialogue like that.
Okay, so what was your favorite scene to write in the book?
My favorite scene to write in the book was in Dead Girl Moon, when Regina finally finds her friend. Mainly because there's a lot of action crammed into just a couple short, brief chapters, and it was very dark. So I enjoy writing those very dark scenes. It's not happy. as the title might suggest.
Yeah, so you're one of the enjoy writing the dark scenes club members, are you?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So you obviously you've got werewolves, you've got eldritch god type monsters. So tell us a little bit about the monsters and some of the other creatures that are in the book.
Okay, so that's another thing that I love to write is my creatures. So in the final short stories in the book, you meet a lovely little character. I'm gonna like kind of like fangirl over it because I love it so much. Its name is Squee, and it's this terrestrial jellyfish creature. It's about like this big, if you can see my hands, and um, and he loves David Bowie. Well, I say it doesn't have a gender, but there was an accident involving a couple teenagers who found a magic book and tried to mess around with something that they shouldn't have, and accidentally transported one of the higher beings, one of the non-human beings from the void into Earthside, into our dimension. And again, bad things happen to them, and this creature is just sort of stranded on, here on our planet with no way of getting back really, and nothing to do except like chew on the bones and try not to get killed and fly. Gravity is not good for Squee. And one of the things that I like to think about when I incorporate these really extremely fantastical creatures into a modern setting is to think about like what are the challenges that we have, other than like if it's like a giant Godzilla kaiju type monster. Obviously buildings are a problem for it, but from the creature's perspective, like what is oxygen going to be an issue? Is gravity going to be an issue? Is it something that's going to be like easily eaten by your house cat? So those are the kind of things I think about when I'm making the creatures.
That would be an interesting story, a monster being chased by a house cat. I like that. Okay, so tell us a little bit about the secondary characters. Are they a little quirky, like to steal scenes or stuff like that?
Yes, they do. I have one character in particular. His name is Theodore Thane, and he is actually a one of the more, or he would like to say he's the best void hunter in creation because he's very narcissistic and egotistical. And once Regina is brought into the werewolf pack, and I'm not trying to give away too many spoilers, but he is a human with, and there's something not really quite right about him. He has these mage powers, and like I say, he's extremely narcissistic. He doesn't really work well or play well with other people. And the way that he found his position as a void hunter in my hunter organization, Hades, was a very precarious situation that he actually didn't want. So being in charge is not his thing because it interferes with like his grand design, which, spoiler. But every time he comes on the page, he has to steal the show. And he's sort of taken Regina under his wing because he feels like he can get some use out of her. Like he sees the potential in her to fulfill one of his many goals. Not his ultimate goal, but he feels like she can be useful. And the way that he interacts with her is very different from the other characters in the story, like the subordinates, the other werewolf, other adult werewolves in the pack. Not because he tries to be nurturing to her, but it's just she is something that he has never really come across before. Like her personality, just her being very open to what he says, like what his version of reality is, and just her like she looks around at the world and sort of views the world in, I'm not going to say a similar way to what he does, because his worldview is very skewed, but she can sort of come somewhere close to his level, where say another character like his actual biological son, who is also a side character in the book, um, doesn't want to interact with his father at all. So you have this character who wants to interact with him, and that actually lets him, you know, play a little bit on the page more so than the others.
Okay, and Christy apparently likes him.
Oh yeah. Yay. I do too. Yeah, he's also not a nice character. He can be quite merciless and very single-minded, and he does some not nice things
Yeah.
to, yeah.
Yeah, well, sometimes they can be the most fun characters to write and to read. So yeah. Okay, so do you have a favorite character?
Oh goodness. I do, and a lot of them are actually in don't appear until later books. That's why I'm like trying to write so fast so that I could like actually show you all these wonderful characters who I love. But Thane is definitely one of my favorites. The werewolf alpha Atlas is a big favorite. He's like the exact opposite of Thane. He's very nurturing and responsible. He's very selfless. And between the two of them, they both raise, try to, imprint their morals onto Regina and raise her in like the best way that they see fit. And a lot of times like that conflict, because they're both sort of playing tug of war with her. That's really fun to write.
Okay, so what are your characters afraid of?
Oh, that's a fun question. Regina is actually, and this isn't really a spoiler because it's on the back of the book. Regina is afraid of her mother, who at the beginning of the book is deceased. But even though that the threat is gone, her mother was very abusive and emotionally manipulative, but in a different way that Thane is. So Regina always, every situation that could be considered like, dangerous or potentially harmful, she always puts it in the context of, is this worse than mother? And usually the answer is no, because from Regina's really childlike perspective from the beginning of the book, like her mother was the worst person imaginable. So as she grows older and encounters these situations that are kind of worse, at least to her immediate like physicality, like a bullet coming at your head or something, mom's not worse than that, but in her mind she is. So that's Regina. And Thane is afraid of failure. Like I say, he's extremely narcissistic, and he's had one crushing defeat in the past that is referenced in Pulling Teeth, and he does not want that to happen again. Anything that threatens what he wants, like what his purpose is, which goes again in line with protecting humans from these, eldritch beings. But that, again, it's not quite like that. That's a good smokescreen for what he really wants. And he's also terrified of people finding out what he really wants to do, which is why he's a little bit antagonistic towards his son, Tony, because, he's one of the only characters who actually is close to figuring out what Thane really is about. And over the course of the series, we're going to get there with them, and it's not going to be pretty.
Okay, so you mentioned that Regina's mother was manipulative, and so is Thane. Do you think that is why she is? I don't want to say close to. I'm not sure exactly whether you describe the relationship, but is that why she's drawn to Thane, because he's familiar in a certain way to her?
That is actually I didn't think of that, but yes. That is actually really good. Like, it's you have that sort of familiar behavior, but again, it's not like from her perspective of Thane, like it's not as bad, and she's actually being able to do something that she's good at, which is helping him hunt other monsters and go into the void and have in her mind these grand adventures with him in this other dimension. Whereas with her mother, she could never do anything right. And you see that in Dead Girl Moon and a little bit in Moonshine through various flashbacks and what she reveals to the other characters. Her mother was very judgmental, and again, she just couldn't, Regina couldn't measure up to whatever task her mother put in front of her. So with Thane, where she's actually getting praise, that definitely like overrides like whatever emotional or manipulative power plays that he does with her.
Cool. So you obviously write contemporary horror fantasy. But are there any other genres that you want to try out in future?
I would love to be able to write a really, really hardcore military sci-fi novel. I've made like several attempts to do so, and I've never been able to flesh out like the science in like your really, really hard, like space opera, hard sci-fi. So I would love to be able to do that eventually. I also really enjoy writing in the more of the speculative fictions, and I am actually this summer launching a speculative e-short series, which is of short fiction, so just short stories, maybe at the longest a little novelette that will cover more subgenres of speculative. So like we get more into the epic fantasy and more of like the sort of soft sci-fi or like different kinds of magic systems, and all of these are standalone, so I can sort of play in other worlds while still keeping my main series going.
Well, that's something to look forward to. So I think we'll wrap it up here, and I'll let you tell everybody where they can find you and your book.
Okay. Again, Pulling Teeth and Other Stories is available on Amazon. I am exclusive to Amazon at the moment, but it's just easier for me to do. My goal would be to go wide eventually, but for right now, Amazon is the place to look. As I said before, from May 22nd to May 24th, the e-version of Pulling Teeth is free to purchase, and you can find all of my links to all of my social media, Instagram, Goodreads, at jessaforest.com. So it's just my name spelled out.com. And also, if you sign up for my end of the month newsletter, you can get a free download of a poetry chapbook of award-winning speculative poetry.
Oh, that is cool. So I'd like to thank you for being here today. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much. It was so wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Okay, and please join Between the Pages book chats tomorrow as we welcome another guest. So, and that's all for now. So, bye.